Everyone, and welcome to the Sporting Heritage Conference 2021. It is very exciting to have you here. This session is going to be representing LGBTQ+ in sporting heritage, and I've got a fantastic lineup of wonderful speakers to sort of demonstrate to you exactly how that can be achieved. I'll introduce them in just a moment, but I just wanted to kind of talk about what you can expect in this particular session. We're going to go through till about 2:45, and what we're really doing is we're looking at how we can focus on diversity and representation, how that can really bring in LGBTQ+ lives. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and plus lives, and how they can be understood, recorded, and also celebrated in our heritage organization. So it is a thrill to be here to talk with you about that. I thought I might just give you a sort of a first of all bit of advice to how we can do this. And I think it's something that has been emerging throughout some of the other sessions as well. And it's really to take you back to that iconic motto that no one is being here sponsored by them, but just to say it is to just do it. I think, like sports, you can sort of plan and strategize and spend all your time in that changing room kind of thinking about what you might do next. But unless you go out there, unless you go onto the pitch, there's no chance of winning. So if you prepare from the start to win, if you say what we want is diversity, inclusion, and representation, if that's where you start from, you're going to get it. So you've got to go out there, you've got to be prepared to call it out, you've got to be prepared to take leadership, and you've got to be prepared to just really get everybody on board. And I've got these wonderful speakers with me who I really think demonstrate that. They have, within each of their different organizations, shown how exactly you can go out there, say, we want to win, and then actually win. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves very quickly for us, and then we'll go into some case studies for you so you can understand exactly what they've been doing. So we're going to go with Lou, and then John, Sarah, and Joanie.
Hi everyone, my name is Lou Engelfield and I'm the director of an organisation called Pride Sports. Pride Sports was founded in 2006 and we were the first organisation that focused purely on LGBTQ+ inclusion in sport and physical activity. We've subsequently been joined by another couple of organisations in the field, which is absolutely great to see. And maybe even better known than the organisation Pride Sports are our campaigns in football. So we run an international campaign called Football versus Homophobia. And then a few years ago, we launched a Football versus Transphobia campaign, which has a week of action in March.
Thanks, Lou. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Jon Holmes. I am senior editor at Sky Sports, and I'm also the founder and lead of an industry network group called Sports Media LGBT+. In my role at Sky, part of my responsibilities involves coordinating and contributing content towards our support of Stonewall's Rainbow Laces campaign, which many of you will have heard of. The idea behind that is to help make sport everyone's game by raising awareness of LGBTQ inclusion and tackling LGBT phobia. And also Sports Media LGBT was something I set up a few years ago, and it's a group that brings together people like me across the sports media landscape, and we work to amplify the voices of LGBTQ+ people in sport, working with organisations such as Lou's Pride Sports and the Federation of Gay Games, which you're going to hear from with Joanie in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Priestley. I'm the curator at Watford Museum, and I also curate for Watford Football Club. We work in partnership with Watford Football Club, its community trust, and with fans and fans organisations on lots of projects celebrating heritage, and we're particularly keen to be celebrating and sharing a lot of the what have often been called hidden histories with sport. I'm a Watford fan as well, and I'm an ally member of our Proud Hornets organisation, and I'm also the very proud mum of a trans teenager.
And over to you, Joanie. You could just unmute yourself, please.
Gotcha. Hi, I'm Joanie Evans. I'm the co-president of the Federation of Gay Games, and we're the largest international LGBTQ+ sporting organisation. We organise the Gay Games, which operates every 4 years. Our first Gay Games was in 1992, and we will be celebrating our 40th anniversary next year.
Fabulous, can't wait. Thank you so much, Joanie. And thank you so much to all our speakers as well. I can't wait to get back to you to hear the case studies that you'll be presenting for us. Just to give you a bit of an outline for the session ahead, we are going to be here till 2:45. So we've got a demonstration of different case studies, and then we're going to go to you. So we're going to go to a bit of a facilitated discussion between all of us. But the most important thing is, if you've got questions, please do drop them into the chat so that we can sort of answer some of the questions, the burning questions that you may have. You can see that Joanie has already, Joe has already said, Joe from Sporting Heritage has already said that there's closed captions. So if you wish to activate them, they're just down there for you to activate them. And if you have any questions, please do put them into the chat, and Joe will kind of get them through across to us as well. But also feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from. Tell us which organizations you're connecting us to right now as well, because that'll be really exciting for us to see as well, and sort of see a demonstration of some of the different ways in which you're trying to connect up with LGBTQ plus representation within your own heritage organization. So if I could now ask for each of our speakers to kind of tell us about a little bit more about the case study that they've selected, and sort of why they think that LGBTQ plus representation is really important in sporting heritage. So we're going to start in the same sequence with Lou.
Thanks, Dan. So I suppose if I start talking about why LGBTQ plus inclusion in sports heritage is important, I think largely that's because LGBTQ plus people have been marginalised within sporting environments for such a long time. And Pride Sports was launched 15 years ago, and the difference we see in terms of visibility of our very diverse communities in sport and physical activity is it's just so different. You know, in 2006, you know, people like Gareth Thomas, John Amici hadn't come out. You know, people like Casey Stoney hadn't come out. We just didn't have visible, very many visible role models in the sports space. And so a major kind of push, a major initiative by queer people in sports environments has been around making a very invisible minority much more visible in a space that we have participated in for hundreds of years. So anything that the heritage sector can do to amplify that visibility is massively important. And I just want to speak briefly about the fantastic work that I think is being undertaken at the National Football Museum. The National Football Museum, as you know, probably, I think, launched in 2012, which was roughly the same time that we started working on the Football versus Homophobia campaign. Football versus Homophobia was originally set up by an organisation in Brighton called the Justin Campaign, and in particular by an artist, Jason Hall, who was from Nottingham and who felt very, very strongly and very passionately about the experience of Justin Fashion, who was the first out gay black footballer in the men's game. And basically Jason wanted to mark his legacy. So what we see at the National Football Museum are some great examples. There's a permanent collection that celebrates LGBTQ plus inclusion in football. They have various different artifacts. Justin Campaign t-shirts, Football versus Homophobia t-shirts. A few years ago, the first rainbow kit in the UK was launched by Altrincham Football Club. They've got one of those shirts there. And also, it's not just in the kind of collections, it's also in the stories that the museum tells. So, for example, in exploring the ban on women's football, for example, the museum have also looked at other kind of barriers to inclusion in the women's game and have been exploring issues around transphobia. On top of that, they've got an amazing virtual tour that they put out during lockdown, which was fantastic. And one of the things that I think is really commendable about the Football Museum is that although leadership has changed there, although staff has changed there in the time that we've known of them and we've used the museum and been part of their community, that commitment to telling the stories of LGBTQ plus people has been consistent.
Over to me, Dan, is that right? Thanks, Lou. Appreciate that. That was really, really good. I'm going to struggle to top that. Okay, I'm gonna share some slides. So let's see if this goes all right. And hopefully that is visible. Yes, great. Thumbs up. Right. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Racing Pride, which is an organisation that's one of our partners, and I'm just going to introduce them to you first. So it's a movement to promote LGBTQ+ inclusion in motorsport, and it was founded a couple of years ago. I'm very proud that it's a partner of ours, and I also have a role on it as one of the co-directors. They have a number of ambassadors who work with the organisation. They're drivers, such as we see here in this image of Charlie Martin, Sarah Moore, Richard Morris, who founded the organisation, and Abby Eaton. Sarah and Abby compete in the W Series, and Charlie and Rich compete in Brit Car Endurance. But they have other ambassadors in different roles, engineers, in the media, marshals, and in esports as well. And they are really making tracks in motorsport. They've formed a partnership with the Aston Martin F1 team, which is really, really groundbreaking, working with them on diversity and inclusion, and also the British Racing and Sports Car Club, 750 Motor Club, and British Automobile Racing Club. And those organisations organise various race meetings and championships across the UK. So it's really great to see the progress they've made in the last couple of years. One of the partnerships they've struck is with Brooklands Museum. Now, Brooklands down in Weybridge in Surrey was the world's first purpose-built banked motor racing circuit. So they have a really important place in British motorsport history. The first and the second ever British Grand Prix races were held at that circuit back in the 20s. And the museum opened on the site about 30 years ago, and it's a fantastic place which really celebrates British motorsport and the role that Brooklands circuit in particular plays in the history of so many different British motor racing series and drivers that race there. So this partnership that they've struck with Racing Pride was to commit to recording and representing LGBTQ histories and providing information and background around some of the personalities and people that are represented at the museum. And I think it's only just begun in August, and one of the first kind of activations that they had was an event to celebrate the first British Grand Prix. The 95th anniversary of that happened this year. And Rich here and Cami, who's Racing Pride's esports ambassador, they set up an event and just engaged members of the public that were coming to the event around what Racing Pride is and the work that it does. But of course, really wanted to get into the collections that they have at the museum. So work is underway already to uncover the LGBTQ stories around those individuals. Picture here of a racing driver called Hugh Hunter, who began competing in the late 20s and took part in events at Brooklands and Donington, also the Monte Carlo Rally. And he was one of very few people in the world to own what was at the time dubbed the world's fastest road car. This was in the 30s, and he raced it in Brooklands and hit speeds of over 120 miles per hour. His long-term partner, Derek, loaned and then bequeathed Hugh's extensive collection to Brooklands. And it's stories such as Hugh's that they're bringing to life through the museum's exhibitions and through online access to material as well. Another really fascinating story, Roberta Cao, the famous racing driver who was the first woman in the UK known to have sex reassignment surgery, having been born with an intersex condition. And under her birth name of Robert, she competed at Brooklands and the Antwerp Grand Prix and other motor racing events. And then after the Second World War, she transitioned and then returned to motorsport as an out trans woman. This picture is from one of the world's oldest motorsports events called the Shelsley Walsh Speed Hill Climb in Worcestershire. And she was still involved in British motorsport into the 70s, and she lived to the grand old age of 93. So it's stories like Roberta's, which are being brought to life through the museum and through the partnership with Racing Pride. And the idea is not to kind of bring kind of new, necessarily kind of new exhibitions or certain areas of the museum to dedicate to this. It's about embedding the information in the existing literature, the content, the plaques around the museum, so to bring these stories to life. So at Racing Pride, we're always looking for ways to be involved in different projects, and part of the learning and the outreach that the museum does is going to form part of that going forwards. And the idea is that industry experts, such as the drivers and other people involved with the organisation, will put on talks at Brooklands and mention about how that relates to the work that the museum does, and you know, the fundamentals of origins of motorsport and how that's being taken forward. And Brooklands is really committed to using inclusive language and diversifying its workforce, and that's really exciting to see. And the next stage really of this work is that there's talks ongoing between Racing Pride and the British Transport Museum in Coventry, which is going to also kind of embrace a lot of the LGBTQ history that Racing Pride is able to draw upon through its network. So that's really kind of a bit of background there to that. And you can find out more at Racing Pride's website, racingpride.com, at the Brooklands Museum website, brooklandsmuseum.com. And more information about what we do at Sports Media LGBT is we try and bring a lot of these stories to life through sports media, and our website there, sportsmedialgbt.com. Thank you very much. And I will pass across to Sarah, I believe.
Wow, not much to follow with you guys, is there? So, well, for me, it's a very different experience. As I said, I'm a local history museum curator, so I don't just deal with sport. We have a community that we're working with all of the time, and that's very varied. And for us, sport is fantastic in terms of, you know, we very much care about the Watford Football Club heritage and the opportunities with it. And broader sports in Watford, but it also gives us an amazing opportunity to uncover and share and celebrate all manner of different experiences. So I've got just one little slide to show you, so I'm going to try and share my screen on this and hope that it works. So I hope that that's working for everyone. So just to say, first of all, on the left we have an Elton John stage costume. The first thing that quite often people say when you say about Watford, they mention the Gap, which isn't actually in Watford, it's in Northamptonshire, but they mention Elton John in relation to Watford Football Club. So you can't ask for much more of a gay icon there. And his work with the football club coming in 1976 transformed Watford. So it's an example of where one individual made a massive change. He brought in Graham Taylor as a manager, and between them they set about creating what we now love as our community club. And so everything that we do in terms of the sort of like the LGBTQ heritage and the wider community work, all the different sort of diverse heritage that we're interested in, is very much kind of going back to those original origins. So we've got some fantastic sort of stories within the collection. I mean, the Elton John stage costume is absolutely unique and a wonderful thing to have. But we're also actively collecting. You can see we have our first captain's armband from Watford's first ever Rainbow Laces match. It's important for us that we're actively collecting, and also whenever anyone comes into the museum, we have a permanent Watford Football Club display that's really popular, and there's always something interconnected, usually related to the Proud Hornets. You can see at the bottom there, that's the museum team and the Proud Hornets team at Hearts Pride. So we take part in Hearts Pride with them each year, and I also sort of like get involved and go along to other activities they do as an ally member, which I got into through working at the museum and being a Watford fan. But we co-host events. So at Pride we share a stall, so it's actually great for us as a museum. It helps us to kind of connect and sort of get into sort of new places and with friends, so that we don't feel quite so new. Or and also it means that, again, from the Proud Hornets point of view, they've got allies and they've got supporters who bring a different dimension. So we co-host events at the museum. For example, we've got an event, got a photograph on the right here of Sophie Cook, who's an amazing speaker on her experience in sport as a trans woman. And she came and gave a presentation at Watford Museum, which was co-hosted between us, Watford Football Club, and the Proud Hornets. So that was amazing to have. And actually you can see the lollipop in the background there, which was the Proud Hornets' first lollipop from London Pride, which was donated to the museum. So we're always doing things there, and it helps us to make the museum a more welcoming place. Often LGBTQ history in local museums is very hidden, or it's a negative story that we're, you know, it's a a sort of like a negative from the past rather than a sort of like wonderful thing that we can celebrate. So that's what's so nice for us, is about having that football connection. Although sometimes there are negatives, obviously Watford fans still, I mean, yesterday the club posted about Pronouns Day and received a lot of online abuse. So, but the club is very keen to be sort of like getting out there and saying things. But Watford fans over the years, because of Elton John's involvement, are very used to, sadly, to homophobic chanting, that kind of thing. But we've got options and opportunities here to keep working together. And right in the middle, you can see the Love Who You Want. That's the sticker that we actually created for this year's London Pride. So if anyone wants one, drop me a message afterwards and we'll be very proud to send you out one of our first ever football sticker, which is exciting for us. And the image on it, the rainbow, is actually one that we created with Proud Hornets. That was a team effort with Watford Football Club, the Proud Hornets, and the 1881, which is the singing section of Watford Football Club, that do displays, and they do poppy displays and all manner of different things. And it was actually their idea to do a gigantic rainbow for Rainbow Laces a few years ago, which was the most amazing thing. Each of those pieces of card was held up to create a fantastic rainbow, which was about 6,000 fans that were involved in that, which was a wonderful thing to be a part of, and that's why we celebrated that with the sticker. So we're always learning. It gives us an opportunity. This is just a few snapshots of the kind of things we're doing as part of our wider work. But I think the reason why I wanted to do this is to say that actually everyone can be an ally and everyone can work and connect, and certainly from my experience as well as a mum, the more that people can see themselves represented, even if it's just the use of pronouns on an email, or if it's seeing things in a museum collection when they come through the door, and seeing things online, it does make a huge difference to making you feel welcome. So I will stop sharing and I will hand over to I think it's Dan and Joanie next. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for Dan to do my slides. Right, that's a motley crew. Okay, my sporting history sort of started when I started playing football for Hackney Women's Football Club in the late 80s. At the time, the team wasn't out, but because we were predominantly lesbian, we decided as a team that we would be an out club. And as such, obviously, we had some backlash in regards to that at the beginning, but it really started my Gay Games journey. The team did become involved in various things, and we were on a program called Running Gay, and that was the first time that I had heard of the Gay Games. And so in 1994, Hackney Women's Football Club attended the Gay Games in New York, which was also the 25th anniversary of Stonewall. So that for us was a really exciting time. We were on the march. And then the opening ceremony was held in the Kaiser Stadium in San Francisco, in New York. Sorry, that's the wrong place. But anyway, it was such an amazing experience and started my journey on my route to the Gay Games. I subsequently had various roles within the Federation of Gay Games, and in just before the Paris Gay Games, London was one of the bidding cities that, along with Paris and got who else now? Limerick, were bidding for the Gay Games in 2018, and unfortunately we didn't get it. But after that time, I was asked to be the co-president of the Federation of Gay Games. So it was in Cleveland that I walked out as a Gay Games co-president, and Paris being our last Gay Games, which is in 2018, and we're now due for our next Gay Games. And if you can move the slides on, Dave. Then our next Gay Games is going to be in Hong Kong. We've just recently, it should have been next year in 2022, but due to travel restrictions to do with our pandemic that we are dealing with at the moment, the Gay Games have now been moved to 2023. But all of the things to do with the Games is still going to be occurring. It's just it's a year later, so hopefully that'll give us a bit more time to prepare, and hopefully the world will be in a better place by then. We're also, the Gay Games is also going to be, it's going to be our 40th anniversary next year. So there'll be lots of things that'll be going on throughout the year. And we will be notifying people on all of the relative social media platforms in regards to that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Jenny. I skipped through the slides, so I don't know, maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about this particular one, which sort of demonstrates that it's not just sports though, isn't it? When you have the Gay Games, it's not just sports. There's so much more than just sports.
No, because we advertise the Gay Games as a sports and culture event. Although we have the sports is the main component, we do have an arts and culture part, which, because it's very important, because our community, as diverse as we are, have, you know, it's about us being able to include everybody. So you just don't have to be, a great footballer. You could be a fabulous dancer, you could be a painter, you could be, you could be a musician. And we try as much as possible to accommodate all of our community. So as well as having sports events at the Gay Games, we also have arts and culture events that participants can sign up for. There's a Gay Games choir, which is made up of singers from all different countries who come together and perform at the Gay Games. So it's just as diverse as our community is, and we try to cater for as many people as possible.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. That's wonderful to see. And that talk about how, sports and culture coming together, I'm going to try and just pick up on that as well now. So I've got some slides to show as well, and I've just kind of lost my position on them. So give me 1 second as I kind of just buy for time. So I think for me, I want to talk about how sports and culture can come together. And in this particular case, we're talking about how it can come together in a museum. And so I was very recently invited to work with the team at the Hull Museums, and so specifically the Ferrens Art Gallery. And I wanted to just talk to you about that particular project, because it was very much about trying to bring together the two into one. And it's called Pride in Our City, and it is now open. So if you're near Hull, please do move across whichever direction you need to go to get to the Ferrens Art Gallery, because it's really exciting. It is, for me, an incredibly, in the museum and heritage sector, we use this word co-curation quite a lot to mean that we like to work with communities to have the community share their story. So it's the voice of the community sharing its story. And Pride in Our City has done a really good job of bringing together young voices, older voices, sporting voices. And so you can see here, as you enter the exhibition, already peeking on the left-hand side here are a set of photographs that were taken by a photographer who is actually a rugby player, who actually is a rugby player for the Hull Roundheads as well. And what this photographer did was actually try to demonstrate the fact that it's not just sports, it's sports and culture, sports and everything else, and how the fact that when somebody's on the pitch, when they come off the pitch, they're more than just a sports person, right? And here we've got Craig demonstrating that. Craig is a wonderful advocate for health, mental health, safe sex, and is regularly seen in venues all across Hull, sort of advocating for that, teaching people about HIV/AIDS, teaching people about PrEP, teaching people about how to have safer sex. That's his role as an advocate within the community, working for one of the community organizations in Hull. And I think that this is a really interesting overlay. We've kind of got, the idea of mental health and also sexual health coming into play with sports here as well. And the fact that a museum has collected this story. Now, with Pride in Our City, what I was very honored to do was record a series of podcasts. And one of the people that we interviewed was Craig, to talk about how that all works together. But another person that I was really moved by the story was Joanie Wilmsley, who is one of the co-founders of the Pride of the Roundheads in Hull. And what I really thought was really striking was this idea that sport, or in this case, rugby, is for everybody. For me, I have only kind of come into sports from the outside as a heritage person, but that sense of welcome that I was given, that sense of, oh, of course you can come and play with us, of course you can come and join us, was really, really strong. And so with Lou, you know, wonderful organizations that you run, including the Football Pride, you know, being able to bring me in and making me feel included, I think has been wonderful. So I just want to play this little clip from Joanie. I think it really demonstrates that sense of inclusivity that we can create between a heritage organization and a sporting organization.
Everybody is a rugby body, which we throw out as a quote all the time, just trying to say, you know, whether you're big, small, short, tall, trans, gay, whatever, you know, you're welcome at rugby. Everyone can get involved. And
that wonderful sort of demonstration for me from Joanie was exactly what I kind of, you know, feel about sports now as well, having come from the heritage sector. And I think that it is really a really strong demonstration of how, when you put the two together, when you sort of say, let's collect the stories of this diversity of people, let's collect the stories as, you know, all the different stories, and demonstrate how, you know, it is more than just sports. Sports is this wonderful thing that moves into everybody's life and is part of so many people's lives. And if we start to collect that, if we start to put that within our heritage organizations, we're actually demonstrating how we are telling a richer, fuller story of our community and our world around us. So get yourselves to Hull Museums, get yourselves to the Ferrens Art Gallery, see how this works in real life. But if I could now sort of turn to the moment where we're going to have a bit of a facilitated discussion. And then if you have questions, please do put the questions in. I've already got one that's ready to go. But I want to open up, first of all, by sort of just saying, I mean, some of the things that have been talked about is that idea of a patron or an ambassador. Of course, Elton John being an incredibly important, influential patron, but also ambassadors. So Jon Amici, I think you spoke about, Lou, Jon Amici being a patron of LGBT plus History Month, but I think Joanie as well, you being in a position of leadership as well, visible leadership. I mean, what does everybody think about that idea of being visible and being and leading the way, you know, really saying that we should be more diverse, we should be more inclusive? I don't know if anybody wants to sort of pick up on that as a question or make comment on it.
I mean, we have, within the Federation of Gay Games, we have various ambassadors from all different fields. But the thing is I think some of it is that it's knowing what you want your ambassadors to do for you. And for us, because we only have an event every 4 years, it limits what we can ask of our ambassadors. But it's always good to have a named person who's out there already doing their sport or whatever they're doing out there, and being able to speak about either their own sexuality or as an ally. And we rely a lot on allies to be able to speak up for the cause of the LGBTQ plus community.
And I think, Joanie, one of the things that I wanted to pick up with you is the fact that you have your own archive now that you're thinking of putting into a heritage organization, something to collect your history. So we're talking about the Hackney Women's Football Club, but also your own sort of archive of materials from the Federation of Gay Games. I mean, what are some of the considerations that you're thinking about when you're coming to a heritage organization? We're kind of flipping it a little bit. So what do you want, you know, a heritage organization to think about when they're asking for people to give them things?
Yeah, I think with the Hackney Women stuff, we were approached by the National Football Museum as a team. So we met with them. They came to London and we met with them and spoke to them about what information they want for us, because they wanted to have an LGBTQ plus section. So at the moment, I've got like a big bag of all of my Hackney staff t-shirts, you know, kit, various photos and stuff that I know that I probably, out of everybody in the team, older members of the team, that have the most memorabilia. So in terms of that, is that I know that if it goes there, then the information will be used, because I follow what they do at the museum. They follow LGBT History Month, and they do highlight women's football as well. And so I do see that when it comes round to specific times of the year, that Hackney will get a mention. But at the moment, they only have our pendant, which we give to other teams there at the moment. So they're still waiting for my stuff. The other thing was that during lockdown, I collected all of the stuff from all of my sporting stuff that I've done. And I've got loads of stuff from my federation work. And it's really trying to find out where to have that stuff to go, because I think it's really important that it's somewhere so that other people can look at it and use it for information, for, you know, people could write stuff about, you know, about the history. So it's trying to find where that needs to go. And because myself and another member of my board, we did a talk at the Bloomsbury Library in London, and they do something every year for LGBT History Month, and that's the closest place to me. So I've boxed up all of this stuff with an intention to send it there, but I'm really not sure about whether or not they will be the right place. Would the information get used? Because we do archive for the Federation. We have our own archive in San Francisco, and we do get people coming to us wanting information to use for their dissertations, or they're writing some piece at school for something. So it's very important to have a collection of something somewhere for people to go and look at.
I think what you've said there is exactly the feeling around it, is that if you're going to give something to a collection, you want it to be honored, you want it to be seen, you want it to be used, you want it to become like a learning and teaching resource. I'm going to come to Sarah now, because I think we've got a message in here from Claire, slightly biased, I think, because Claire works with you, Sarah, but she says, I'm so lucky to work with you at Watford and to see all the wonderful community work that is going on and the real impact that it has. Now, Sarah, in terms of talking about LGBTQ plus and then plus, you are very much that. You are an ally, and we're talking about this, the importance of allies. In terms of collecting things and making them accessible, what do you think are some of the things that advice that you would give to a heritage organization as well, and especially if they themselves are the allies?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think don't be afraid. I think that's one of the most important things. I found this recently, as I said, about my son coming out as trans. People worry about offending, and they worry because they care and they're interested and they want to be supportive. But what I'd say is, if you're talking to people and you communicate, like Joanie was saying about how she feels about her amazing archive, having those conversations and having those honest conversations with someone, and that's how we actually built up our connection with the Proud Hornets, so that actually whenever they have got something new, we all get really excited, and I get a photo and go, look, we have this, and I'm like, yay, it's coming in the museum, and we put it online and we say, you know, it goes on our social media and say, look what we've got now, but also you can buy this on the Proud Hornets website. So we do a little bit of a promotion at the same time. So I think being enthusiastic and passionate and excited to work with people, but also listening. We find this in anything we do with football, but across all the work we do in the community, is actually asking people what they would like to see, what they want to know about, and having those conversations. Like with football fans, you know, you can have some really amazing items in a collection, but actually there's some really small quirky things that will appeal to a particular sporting sort of fan base or something like that, you know, that you just would make no sense to anyone outside of that particular fan base. So, you know, having those connections and having that connectivity. But I do think, yeah, being an ally and going out and asking. I mean, how we started was, I thought the Proud Hornets had got started, and I just got in contact and said, hi, I'm Sarah, I work at the museum, would really love to work with you, and how can I support and what can I do? And it's just grown from there, and it keeps growing. So we've got more things will be happening soon. We're looking forward to our latest Rainbow Laces match coming up soon. There's always something else around the corner. But again, the idea of ambassadors, you know, you have got someone iconic like Elton John, but I love the idea that we can all be an ambassador, and that we can all be an ambassador for heritage, for communities, for LGBTQ, all of these things, it all kind of so interconnects, and that's what's so lovely. And that's why, yeah, I'm really lucky to work with Claire, but we're so lucky to have that kind of community connection in Watford and people that want to do that with us, because you can't be an ally unless people let you in and they share and they want to work with you.
Thank you very much. I think the key message there is be the Elton John that you want to see. I'm going to come to you, Jon, because there has been a question that's come through that is kind of connecting here a little bit, because it's about language, it's about approach, it is about, you know, what are the ways in which, if you are, it has come from a heritage organization, they're sort of saying they're a little not sure, they're not quite sure about what is the right and the wrong language. They don't want to offend or upset, and they feel that lack of understanding from them sometimes might be an invisible barrier for some individuals and for some organizations as well. So what would you provide as a sort of a top tip for maybe overcoming that language barrier or overcoming that initial ask? But at the same time, from what Sarah's just said, there's also an excitement when somebody's approached by a heritage organization, right? And says, you know, the heritage organization says, we want to collect your things. But Jon, what do you think about that language aspect?
Yeah, well, I think the case study from Brooklands is a good case in point with something like that. I mean, take the story of Roberta Cao, for example. You know, at the time, people had a very kind of limited understanding about something like sex reassignment surgery, and even the ways that we would maybe talk about Roberta's story 10 years ago, we'd use different language now because we understand more about, you know, trans identities and, you know, different experiences within that. So I think for Brooklands as a museum to recognize that Roberta has a place in their collection, but also involve an organization like Racing Pride that can help them to navigate that language. They've got you know, one of their ambassadors, Charlie Martin, is a trans woman. So to be able to understand and maybe look at Roberta's story through more of an LGBTQ lens rather than a motorsport lens, I think is really, really helpful for them. And it allows them to kind of incorporate that language into the literature and the content, as I mentioned in the presentation. And I do think, you know, a lot of museums, maybe I would hope that a lot of them already have kind of LGBTQ people working in their organizations or affiliated to them, but maybe if they don't, it's about inviting the community in through an organization that's relevant to them and being able to have those conversations and understand that the language is evolving all the time. So I would always recommend reaching out, and Sports Media LGBT, hopefully, you know, we can help facilitate some of that. One of the documents and the resources that we produced last year was around using inclusive language and comms for sports specifically, when it comes to including LGBTQ people. So we're open to those conversations.
There's also, Jon, as an editor for a news media organization, I think there's also an excitement from your perspective as well when an organization does collect this history and heritage. Some of these stories, as Sarah's sort of demonstrated, they're hidden, but there is an excitement and a thrill for you, for example, during LGBT plus History Month or Pride Month, or, you know, many other stop points within the year to actually cover those sorts of stories as well. So for a heritage organization or a sporting group, there's a great opportunity to kind of get some more coverage and some more, I suppose, a spotlight on what they're doing as well.
Absolutely. And I think not just for the organization that I work for, but across the whole sports media industry, there's a huge appetite to uncover more of these stories, these hidden histories, and be able to sort of tell people's stories in a way that we couldn't in sports media 20 years ago, because, you know, there was less visibility, there was less representation, and we all work for organizations. We have editors that we report into. There wasn't much kind of understanding in our industry about these types of sporting heritage and the kind of different personalities within them. So as an example, you know, I was able to work with Joanie and Ashley Pitter at Stonewall Football Club on a story that we did in February, kind of tied into their experiences at the time of It's a Sin, which of course, as we know, was a huge hit and, you know, had a huge audience reach. So to be able to kind of tell some of the football stories from that time through the experiences of Joanie and Ashley was a way to bring that to life.
And also, I've got to say, a collection from Stonewall Football Club has gone into the Bishopsgate Institute as well. So I think another great demonstration there, another case study of how, you know, the two can come together as well. And I think Steph Dickers at Bishopsgate Institute is always incredibly open to this idea of, you know, trying to be as representative when we're talking about collecting LGBTQ plus histories and lives. So sports is definitely included. But I think the thing that you've also given us, Jon, is this great demonstration that it's diversity of sports as well. So racing and all the other things that are involved in the gay games, for example, that Joanie's brought in as well. I am going to come to Lou as well for a question for you, Lou, because I think One of the things that I am greatly inspired by you is this this way in which you've brought in football v homophobia and also football v transphobia across the social media world as well. And we have a question in from Claire Davies. I'm going to read this out. It says, Claire has just switched careers from being a primary school teacher for about 25 years. So would really encourage any advice that you may have in relation to social media, because the technology is a real learning curve, especially for someone who's a mature career changer. So it sounds a bit woolly, Claire says, but what could you give advice for in terms of going into that social media sphere and engaging with people in terms of sports, LGBTQ plus lives, and recording our histories as well?
Wow. I suppose the thing that's really important to remember is that actually social media is the friend generally of LGBTQ plus people, although it's quite a hostile environment currently because it's free. And because generally LGBTQ plus charities and organizations are massively underfunded. I mean, the amount of charitable funding received by LGBTQ plus causes in the UK is minuscule. It's like, you know, something of a percent, you know, not even 1% of charitable funding. So social media, we've used social media with football versus homophobia and more recently with football versus transphobia, because it's a way of getting our message out that doesn't actually cost us loads of money. It has to be said. I think generally, you know, our things are, do not go down rabbit hole arguments with people. You know, there are plenty of keyboard warriors out there, and we just try not to engage with those people, because I fundamentally don't believe that Twitter is the right place to have an in-depth conversation with somebody. But if I give you an example, maybe about, I don't know, 8 years ago, a county FA put out a tweet about football versus homophobia month of action, and somebody went, oh, you know, pink and black, you know, that's you know, pink, that's a really stereotypical color. Why are you using that in a challenge to the county FA? And I think the county FA were a bit freaked out by this. So we then took the time to explain to that person that actually the colours of the campaign are supposed to reflect Justin Fashionu's identity as a gay man, because pink was used as a colour to denote gay men historically, both, you know, but also during the war, in terms of gay men were sent to concentration camps with a pink triangle. And that we also use the colour black to denote Justin Fashionu's blackness. He was the first £1 million black footballer in the UK. So that's the reason we use those colours. And we also sort of like, you know, linked to an article about gay men wearing a pink triangle. And, you know, you never know what kind of response that you were going to get from that. But the guy, just fair play to him, just came back and was just like, wow, I had no idea. Thank you so much for explaining that. You know, I didn't know that. And then the county FA, I think, said they didn't know that either. So it was just, that was like a kind of really fantastic kind of learning moment. I do think social media's moved, you know, particularly Twitter's moved away from that a bit, you know, that kind of like opportunity to discuss things and take time, but it gives you a really good way of getting messages out. So for us, I think if you use it as a public service announcement rather than a debating tool, it can be really useful.
Thank you very much, Lou. And I think the other thing that you did very well is, again, I'm just going to talk about football pride, which is, you know, you took something, the moment when we're all in lockdown, and you turned it into a festival that we could all enjoy as well. And that was very much via social media. I saw it all on Facebook, on Twitter. You took advantage of whatever the platform was allowing you to broadcast, Instagram as well, whatever you could use to broadcast, and you did that. And it just, for a start, sitting at home and being able to enjoy that when I was at home here on my own, I think it was just wonderful to see. But it also is part of history now. It's there. It's still, you can go back to some of these and re-see them. But I think by what you've said about the black and the pink here, it's a demonstration of how important it is to understand history. when you're doing this sort of work as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I totally agree, and I think Football Pride was amazing. I think because what happened was we kind of had this idea. There were 4 of us. We had this idea. We knew that LGBTQ+ people were feeling really isolated, and lockdown was affecting our community disproportionately. There was no football, so nobody could go to a game. Nobody could play a game. It was just, you know, it was such a difficult time for, you know, LGBTQ+ people engaged in football. And what was fantastic about it, in reality, was that all we did was approached everyone we knew and said, what can you deliver for us? So Dan, for example, you were in the midst of doing history from home. Museum from home. And so we just said, you know, Dan, can you do something around that for us? And you just said, yeah, of course I will. And then we spoke to, you know, other people who pre-recorded panel discussions for us, and we aired them on the day, and just amazing stuff. And what was just brilliant was that everybody we asked, almost everybody we asked, said yes, of course. Yeah. And so we had this incredible program of like 12 hours of stuff. We had, like, you know, Richie Anderson from Radio 2 DJing at one point with like Proud Baggies. You know, we had the most incredibly diverse program, but it was absolutely because everybody just came together in that moment and totally delivered for us. And, you know, but there were 3 of us from kind of Pride Sports on the day, sitting behind Zoom and, you know, trying to make sure that everything worked out okay technically. But yeah, it was just a kind of fantastic mass participation effort, really.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I think that this is a great demonstration of what everybody has said across the board, which is just ask, and you will be surprised by the number of people who will want to come and support you. Now, the very final question I'm going to give to Kevin, and Kevin is from Sporting Heritage, and I think it's a great example for us to kind of give a very quick, punchy piece of advice or a lesson that you've learned. So Kevin would like to know, given that there is underrepresentation of LGBTQ+ traditionally in sports, what might be a recommendation that you might give in terms of capturing that heritage for the very first time for an organization, or what has been a lesson that you've learned in your engagement with a heritage organization? So a sort of a punchy sort of mic drop moment, a piece of advice or a recommendation from you would be wonderful. So shall we kind of go in that sequence again, where we'll go Lou, John, Sarah, Joanie?
I think my piece of advice is, don't be frightened to ask. Always, you know, come to organizations and ask us. You know, we've heard a bit about people being frightened of getting the language wrong or not understanding the language, but I can absolutely say the fact that people are nervous about getting the language wrong means that you care, and therefore we want to support you. You know, if you didn't care, you wouldn't care. You know, if you weren't interested, if you weren't invested, you wouldn't care about getting the language wrong. You wouldn't want to be doing everything right. But use the organization, co-create.
Yeah, my tips would be like, we love stories. I mean, I love stories. It's kind of the meat and drink of our organization, of the work that I do. And I think a lot of stories are out there that have just not been told yet. They've not been discovered. So at your museums, at the organizations that you work for, you might be sat on a fantastic story of sporting heritage, of sporting history that happens to have an LGBTQ theme, an LGBTQ affiliation. I think it's about recognizing that, being able to recognize that, having conversations around it, and then, you know, approach somebody like me, somebody like Lou, if it's football specific perhaps, but, you know, find a way to bring that story to a wider audience. And we're really interested. It's only a few months away for LGBT History Month, and some of you might have seen some of the fantastic work that the BBC did, in particular on BBC Sport, around bringing those stories to life. We're very passionate about it at Sky Sports as well. We tend to do the sort of lion's share of our work around November, December time, which is also coming up in the calendar, because that's when the Rainbow Laces activation happens. But all these different points of the calendar are opportunities, and these stories that you've maybe only just scratched the surface of, they could be ones that really engage people. So don't hesitate to reach out and have conversations about them.
Yeah, I think I would say something very similar. But you can, reach out to other organisations as in different directions. If anyone's listening today and they want to speak to us at Watford about how we work with people or how we've made contacts, but asking, like a local organisation, showing interest, signing up for newsletters, turning up for events. I'm actually going to my first England match with the Proud Hornets, which I'm sort of looking forward to, but just to be there and show support, and yeah, that idea of all year round as well, because I think that's the thing sometimes, that it's fabulous to have showcase months to celebrate things, but also so people know that you're not just there for 1 month and you've gone, oh, it's February, or oh, it's October, it's Black History Month, so that people know that that's a year-long sort of interest and commitment there.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to do at the Federation is trying to, in some ways sort of like build our brand in a way, because not everybody knows about the gay games and stuff. So we do have a monthly newsletter where we try and highlight either a member organisation or an individual. So we're always looking for content, same as what John or anybody else would be doing. But I think that people just, we just try and create the spaces for people to speak up is what we need to be doing. So I think that right now, because we're in a world where social media is being used a lot, and there is a lot of scope to use that to bring out the stories that we need to. So, we as an organisation are always looking for content, and especially coming up to the Gay Games, we have a lot of our scholarship recipients that give accounts of their life stories about how it is for them in their own communities where they live. So it really is about having the stories out there to broaden people's outlook on the world of the LGBTQ plus community, not just in sport, but in culture and just in general life as a whole.
Thank you. Well, I think the summary seems to be that go out there, make contact, make that content, but establish that trust, keep that trust going. It's a really important aspect of this engagement, this community building that we're doing. And I think if we can kind of just come back to that very first moment that I sort of said, it's about just do it. Imagine yourselves in that changing room. You're about to go into that massive, really important game. So you've been training for this for the whole of, all the time now. You've been getting ready for this. Diversity is that goal. So you just got to go out there and get that goal. So go out there and win it. That is all for our wonderful panel today. Thank you so much to each of the speakers who have just been demonstrating how we can bring together sporting heritage and LGBTQ plus lives and really celebrate diversity, equality, and inclusion. So thank you so much for coming along, everybody, your questions, and to our panel as well. Shall we just go off mute and just give us each other a round of applause, a little round of applause? Here we go, off mute, and yay!
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.